We might have different points of view, but we're not separate. Design thinking democratizes that creative process to allow those different points of view to work collectively and together in order to achieve an outcome, as opposed to a single individual identifying the hill and then executing against it. And when you have that diversity of voice in the room, you get better outcomes, you get better solutions, you get things that are more representative of the community that you wish to serve.
Last thing of this piece of this is obviously we've started as sort of as at a convergence point. We've diverged, we've now converged, and we sort of now diverged again because we've got all these ideas and all these capabilities, and we've matched them up and we've prioritized them. Now, as an entrepreneur, and even as a customer, you can't implement everything at once, especially in something that's new and transformational that nobody's really ever done before. So we came up with this idea of developing this, what I call the Agile-based roadmap or the Agile-based strategic plan to help identify those value props. So the idea is all those things that are really important to the customer and match our immediate capability, so they end up in the top left-hand corner, right-hand corner, are what we want to focus on. So I love this concept in design thinking, and I think, Nicholas, if you'd expound upon this whole idea of developing the cake roadmap, right? The cupcake, the birthday cake, the wedding cake.
Absolutely, John. So a lot of times we'll hear the word MVP, minimum viable product. And I think what this activity does is it reframes what the minimum viable product is, to think of it more as the minimum delightful experience, right? Because the minimum viable product is often driven by what's on the truck, what's feasible today. While the minimum delightful experience is what's the smallest piece of value that we can deliver to the user right now, right? So when we talk about the kind of cake roadmap, right, what's that cupcake, right? If the big vision for the whole business is this, right, and that's the wedding cake, the whole shebang, it's a little fuzzy, maybe we don't quite understand what this wedding cake looks like, maybe we're not sure how many candles, how many layers, if it's sprinkles or fondant, icing, we're not really sure, but we know we have kind of a general sense. But, the famous, how do you eat an elephant, is one bite at a time. It's like, well, what's that minimum cupcake that still has that yummy taste of that wedding cake, but small enough and yummy enough that if we just give that to an end user, they'll be happy. They'll say, give me more. What's next? And so the activity of scoping your roadmap around this idea of what's the minimum delightful experience, what's the follow-on kind of experiences, allows you to scope that project in a way that you're minimizing the collateral damage of a failed experiment. Right, by keeping it small, you're delivering something delicious, but also minimizing, the damage, the collateral damage. If that cupcake maybe isn't the right piece, maybe the mix isn't quite perfect, but you've at least scoped something that you can deliver. Ideally, it has the value that your user expects, but it's small enough that if it's not, you can make another cupcake really quickly.
You as an entrepreneur on a startup, you don't have time to build and sell the wedding cake. People don't even know if they want to get married yet, right? They don't even know if they want to date yet. So the idea of building cupcakes to help you, and so this what came up with this idea is this is how you come up with cupcakes, you go test them, and by doing this iteration of convergence, divergence, or divergence, convergence, divergence, convergence, right? We've converged on our cupcake. And now, if you go through this step, I would surmise that your odds of having good market fit have increased dramatically. By the way, it doesn't cost a lot to do this. In fact, in today's world, virtually, that's why the last picture on this slide is, Nicholas and I used to travel all over the world. We've been to Germany, we've been to London, I've been to South Africa, we've been to Hong Kong or Singapore doing these workshops and working with our clients through this process. And now we can do it all virtually. I mean, we had to because I haven't been I traveled for business in over 18 months. So as we wrap this section up, the message is, by the way, we'll put a link or we'll give some capability if anybody's listening or watching wants this sort of 5-step process for market fit, better market fit. We're happy to share it. But that's sort of why I wanted to tie the experience that Nicholas has as a designer to the work that Jan and I are doing with entrepreneurs and startup. So that's that section.
And just to add to that, John, like when I think about what I would do if I was starting a business today, I figure out like what are 5 cupcakes that are kind of close to my wedding cake, that are kind of in the vein of my wedding cake, and find the cheapest way to figure out if people care about it. And that would be, standard process, a standard kind of practice, like with each business I would launch is like, what are my 5 cupcakes each month until I kind of ooch my way to product market fit.
Yep. And that actually goes into the next sort of thing I want to just pick your brain about. And I'm going to start with another story again, if you guys don't mind. But it's a term actually that you introduced to me to is FANAFI, find a need and fill it. Now, I want to tie that back to a book that if every entrepreneur listening to this section hasn't read, it's called The Blue Ocean Strategy. And I want to give an example, and I want to try to show you how Nicholas and I have sort of taken the concept of working and selling in a blue ocean and how we've applied design thinking to sort of enhance that.
For anybody that's listening to this, definitely go read that book. Like, if we're posting the video, you're going to see me doing the raise the roof motion. That book is phenomenal. And like, I'm getting my notebook out to take notes on this section specifically. So I'm super excited.
And by the way, these charts obviously will be available in the video, but I'm happy to share them with others. So this actually sort of ties into what we just talked about, right? This idea of my capability as an entrepreneur or startup. What do I sell basically? Or what does my product or service do? And then on the other line is this idea of the prospect's needs. And right in the last section, we talked about how we have high needs and high capability, we have a good market fit. But what really happens in the world today is our prospect needs are represented by these red dots, and our capability is on the other axis, right? And what happens is that's where so many people go in and sort of try to do this feature function selling, right? Here's your need, here's my capability. Here's my need, here's your capability, right? So it's this idea of back and forth, back and forth. What I like to say is that's, if you, those of you that are my age and watched Lost in Space, it's like when the robot would go, danger, Will Robinson, danger, danger. You are now swimming in the red ocean. In other words, you are just in a feature function battle with 100 other companies and 100 other product or services, and you're just going to beat your head down on cost. And so what most salespeople do is they go, well, I'm going to upsell. I'm going to tell you about the value add. So they start talking about more capability that the client does, in theory, hasn't said they need. Well, unfortunately, the prospect or the buyer perceives that as increased cost and complexity, which of course slows your deal down. That was the exact problem we had after we bought the company. We started talking about all the red dots and all the green dots, and all of a sudden the client's going, holy crap, this is going to be really expensive and it's going to take me forever to deploy and implement. So I would argue, or so the question is, how do I get out of this red ocean and into the blue ocean? And so the concept is sort of basic, but sort of, and Nicholas, you actually alluded to it when we started up, which was sort of cool because we hadn't rehearsed this. It's how do you uncover the clients or the prospects' unconsidered needs, right? So it's how do you identify problems and needs the prospect does not even know they have, which is a classic example of being a disruptor, right? It's Uber is probably the greatest one. Whoever thought that you would want to, order a car service from a total stranger on an app, right? And you disrupt the taxi cab industry. Right? So the taxi cabs were all fighting in this red ocean. And Uber came up and figured out there were a whole bunch of things that me as a rider didn't even know I needed. But once I realized it and they showed it to me, it opened up the blue ocean.
I love this. I think one of my favorite, product design case studies to kind of illustrate this is some of the work that OXO, they're a kitchen product company. They make good grips. I'm sure people are familiar with them. And what made that story so interesting is that they knew they had a target audience, right? They had a target segments that they're going after from a marketing standpoint. But from a product design standpoint, what they said was, we're going to design for the end user that has the greatest impairment in using their hands. We're going to focus on senior citizens. We're going to focus on people with arthritis. And we're going to design our product to meet their needs. And so by picking that extreme user that's often not considered, right, and designing their product for them, they're able to satisfy the needs of their entire segment. So by starting kind of in the extreme on that edge, a group of people that's often ignored, our senior citizens and our senior community are often ignored when hipsters are making technology. There's this whole world of unmet need that, Oxo tapped into and has been incredibly successful as a result. I mean, right now we have the iPhone, right? One question I ask myself is, I've observed my grandmother using your iPhone, and all she does to navigate is press the back button. She picks something, she goes down a tunnel, and then if it's the wrong tunnel, she just back, starts at the top, and then goes down again. And this is how her interaction behavior. But nobody's designing an interface that's going to support that behavior, right? Those interfaces aren't out there. No one's designing phones. No one's dividing devices for these people. No one's designing devices for children, right? We're just trying to find, right now, if you look at the design of our technology, it's like those crazy, or it's like those remote controls that your cable company gives you with 200 buttons. It's there's all the features. And Apple came out and made 2 buttons and 3 buttons, and it's really easy to use.
One of my favorite examples is the cable company remote. And if you've bought a Roku TV and you look at the Roku remote, they designed it to fit the hand, the grip, that you could. They did a lot of design, and there's 6 buttons on it.
Yeah. But you don't get there until you start thinking about the users with unmet needs or the users that weren't considered. Those extremes, the fringe. I think one of my favorite books, it's by Chip and Dan Heath, called Decisive. They say there's 4 horsemen of bad decision making, and one of them is narrow framing. That's one of the big ones, which is I'm only looking at this tunnel. I haven't expanded the aperture and thought beyond kind of that red ocean into the fringes of the blue ocean and find that opportunity there.
Yeah, I think one thing that I'm going to just double click on as far as process goes, I think we're going to this episode's coined phrase is going to be double click because we've all used it at this point. So we do a lot of research into Disney, when we first started Apex, and he has this interesting thing, 4 levels of detail, right? And he would also force the Imagineers when they were coming up with ideas. It's you have to be able to distill this down to 1 sentence. If I don't care if it's a new door hinge or if it's a new ride for the park, 1 sentence as to why we need to do this, right? What is the value prop in that 1 sentence? And I find it interesting because some of the people that I talk to, at least in the area that I'm in, now I'm finally expanding outside of the Midwest and meeting a bunch of different people. But when we first started, especially in COVID, what we were encountering when we were talking to all of these people is a very anxious mindset when we started to take them into that first diverge, right? It's they get all of this influx of ideas and then they're oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do with all of this. But what I found fascinating is actually the more time you're able to be disciplined in that space where there's a lot of different ideas, the simpler the outcome becomes, and John just made a great point with Roku. It's the more time you spend in the quote unquote anxiety of the unknown, you end up with 6 buttons instead of 200. It's really, really easy to say, let's put all of the features on the remote. It is exponentially more difficult to figure out which 6 buttons, I'm going to cuss here, but which 6 buttons people actually give a shit about, right?
Yep. It's easy to put out the kitchen sink into the product. It's hard to prioritize. People don't like to prioritize. They're risk averse. They don't want to be the one that made the decision, So there's a lot of reasons why people have difficulty picking those 6 buttons.
Dude, it's so important.
And a lot of design is about reducing that complexity, right? It's a lot of design is removing stuff. We'll see these interfaces that are designed by engineers and we're lose that. Why do we need this? What's the user trying to do with this page? Okay, that's the priority. Let's remove all the fluff from this page and only focus on the key interaction that the user cares about in this context. And remove the noise, right?
I want to give you the last word, Nicholas, on something that you brought up with me, and I'm not sure I even understand it, so I'm sort of looking forward to it. And you had mentioned something about democratizing the creative process. And so it really caught my eye. We've had a few discussions on it, but I'd love you to just sort of expound on that for us.
Yeah, it actually dovetails really nicely what we were just talking about, right? Like people making decisions, right? How do those decisions get made? And for design thinking, right? For the longest time, going back to that kind of great person or great man theory of history, there's this visionary, this auteur, that has this mega opus vision, magnum opus vision, and we're all just kind of actors in his show and we're trying to help. When we democratize the creative process, it's very disruptive because it allows a lot more diversity into that creative process. So instead of just one person kind of having a vision for a software, it's the difference between making a product and $100 million art project, right? And an art project is a single visionary kind of directing, the Banksy model, where Banksy's the name, but there's 200 artists making his work, right? Versus an effort where you've democratized the creative process. You're bringing in your end users. You're bringing in different subject matter experts. You're bringing in a lot of different points of view to really vet that idea before you invest in developing it. So what design thinking really allows people to do is to collaborate in a structured way, bring a diverse point of view to those collaborative activities, and look at the problem through the same lens with that kind of difference that they bring. We might be different, but we're not separate. We might have different points of view, but we're not separate. And design thinking democratizes that creative process to allow those different points of view to work collectively and together in order to achieve an outcome, as opposed to a single individual identifying the hill and then executing against it, right? And when you have that diversity of voice in the room, you get better outcomes, you get better solutions, you get things that are more representative of the community that you wish to serve.
Well said. If anybody liked what they saw today, I'm happy to share the Disruptor's 5 steps to better market fit chart. And I've also prepared the Disruptor's design thinking primer, which I'm happy to share. And, we can work in the show notes or reach out directly, a direct message to me on LinkedIn or Twitter or something. But hopefully you found this enjoyable. Nicholas, you and I could probably talk for another 2 hours. Jan, I'm going to let you have the last word. And
want to buy chopped liver over here? I feel like I could hang out for 2 more hours.
Well, yeah. Well, no, but Nicholas and I, I bring on people sometimes.
You guys go way back.
Well, yeah. So, but you know what? I always say, Jan, you're sort of my brother from a different mother because we sort of came from the same part of the world. But Nicholas and I are definitely like brothers from a different mother, and he has made me like probably whichever brain is the creative side. He has definitely got me trying to be more creative, and I think I'm helping him look at how to apply all these cool things he does and take it outside into the real world and talk to people that actually want to buy stuff. So I appreciate, Jan, you having us on today, and it's been very good. Namaste, as we said to my last guest, who was anyway. So
climb Mount Everest.
Yeah. So, Jan, anything else you want to conclude as the host?
I just want to say how appreciative I am of being able to be around these types of conversations, right? So, I mean, like I kind of went off on that original tangent where I'm just like fascinated with the neurology and the biology behind what you're doing, right? And so making this transition and meeting John. John kind of put it lightly where he was like, I taught Giannis for empathy map. And the reasoning is because I was trying to come up with a physical business model that would not work. And he was like, this is not bueno. Let's take you down a different rabbit hole before you just waste a whole bunch of time or money developing something that is not going to fit the market. Right. So that was my first lesson, like coming up on 2+ years ago now. And I've been obsessed with it ever since. So understanding that there are all of these minds, working on the intimate connection between psychology, sales, marketing, creating safe spaces, questions, games, all of these different things to get humans to interact better. I have this thing that I'll just kind of, leave at the end of the episode here, that we're going through a consciousness revolution right now. Like the human body, the human brain, that we've gone through these stages. If you look at history, where, we had the bubonic plague and then the Renaissance, and then we had the flu of 1918 and we had the roaring 20s, and now we've had COVID and technology got introduced, and people are adopting technology. They're getting used to technology, and they're, instantaneously communicating. And now there's a group of aspiring Renaissance men, I'll call us, that are looking at how do we advance humanity inside of this latest context. And I want to make sure that the guests that are listening really understand the gravity of the types of conversations like these that are going on. It's that this is not just, revolutionizing a process. This is humans communicating completely democratized at scale. We're seeing crazy crap happen in the stock market because of Reddit and 4chan and Twitter and all this instantaneous communication. We're seeing crazy stuff happen in innovation. To John's point, the speed of disruption has drastically increased over the last 30 years. And now we're trying to figure out how to slow people down again and get them to communicate with each other, and using all of these different triggers. So for anybody that's listening, if you're listening right now, you've made it all the way to the end, go back to the beginning 2 days from now and re-listen to the episode, because I guarantee there'll be things that you think of when you give your brain that chance to rest and process things that you'll pick up from the episode. Because I know I'm sitting here recording it, and I'm going to be excited while I'm post-editing it to listen again and pick up on all of these ideas. So thank you both for allowing me to, kind of host the party, I guess, in a way, so to speak.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Cool. And for everybody that's listening, we'll make sure that we put stuff in the show notes and the descriptions. And like John said, for right now, the best way to try to get a hold of any of the, materials that were used on the podcast, probably just send me a direct message on LinkedIn, or go ahead and add John on LinkedIn. John, do you want to let them know how to spell your name so that they can type that in?
Sure. It's last name is Kund, like Delta, T like Tango, Z like Zulu. So
beautiful. And then I'm Jan Almasy. It's Jan. It looks like Jan, Jan. Almasy, Almasy. And then Nicholas, do you have a LinkedIn as well?
Yeah, it's I believe it's Nicholas Jayanty, Jayanty.
Beautiful. If you guys want to know any more, go ahead and follow us on LinkedIn. And until next time, been another episode of The Disruptor. Have a great day, guys.